Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi touched down Tuesday afternoon at Daegu International Airport in South Korea, kicking off a two-day visit that will take her to Andong, the hometown of South Korean President Lee Jae Myung, for what is shaping up to be one of the most symbolically charged summits between the two neighboring nations in recent memory. The scenes at the airport were carefully choreographed, a visual signal of just how much both governments want this relationship to work. Takaichi stepped off the plane and inspected an honor guard before being received by South Korea's second Vice Foreign Minister Kim Jina. Around 170 police officers and 40 patrol cars and motorcycles had been deployed at and around the airport to ensure her safety. An escorted motorcade then swept her away toward Andong, roughly 190 kilometers from Seoul. The warmth was immediate. Shortly after her arrival in Andong, President Lee welcomed Prime Minister Takaichi with a hug at the entrance of hotel, wearing a light sky blue tie that matched the color of the Japanese leader's suit. It was the kind of deliberate personal detail that speaks louder than any diplomatic communique. President Lee set the tone for what both sides hope will be a genuine turning point in relations between two countries whose histories are anything but simple. "You have gone to great trouble to come all the way to this small city," Lee told Takaichi as he ushered her into the hotel. The two leaders were set to hold their fourth meeting in about 6 months on Tuesday, underscoring their push to deepen ties between two historical Asian rivals in the face of mounting geopolitical challenges. The pace of that diplomacy has been striking. Lee and Takaichi first held summit talks on October 30th, 2025, on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Gyeongju. The two leaders then held a brief meeting during the G20 summit in South Africa in November. Then came the Nara visit in January, and now Andong, Tuesday's try. T marks the first time incumbent leaders of South Korea and Japan have exchanged visits to each other's hometowns. That distinction matters. Bringing a foreign leader to one's hometown, not the capital, not a formal state venue, but the city where you were born and grew up, carries an intimacy that protocol alone cannot manufacture. South Korea's presidential office confirmed that Takaichi would be received with treatment equivalent to that for a state guest. A traditional honor guard of 43 ceremonial guards, the 29-member military band, and 12 flag bearers lined the entrance of the Summit Hotel protocol that South Korean officials described as approaching the level accorded to a full state visit. After their talks, the two leaders were scheduled to attend a dinner party where a traditional chicken dish from Andong, a regional specialty prepared according to a time-honored recipe, would be served alongside traditional Andong liquor and sake from Nara Prefecture in what the presidential office framed as a gesture of harmony and friendship between the two countries. The evening was also set to include a visit to the Haho Folk Village, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where they would watch a traditional Korean pansori performance and a fireworks display rooted in the Joseon dynasty. The warmth and the symbolism, of course, are in service of something more pressing. The backdrop to this summit is a world that looks considerably more volatile than it did even a year ago. Prime Minister Takaichi said she hoped to have detailed conversations on cooperation to ensure stable supplies of energy, speaking to reporters before departing Japan for South Korea. Energy security is at the top of the agenda for good reason. South Korea and Japan face growing energy security challenges due to their heavy reliance on Middle East-produced crude oil and related products following the outbreak of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. Both leaders are expected to discuss alternative cess, apply routes that bypass the Strait of Hormuz, as well as broader energy supply security. Japan and South Korea are expected to agree on a cooperative framework for joint crude oil stockpiling and procurement coordination. The framework would be based upon Takaichi's POWER Asia initiative, short for Partnership on Wide Energy and Resources Resilience, that she unveiled for Southeast Asian nations at a virtual summit in April. At that meeting, Takaichi proposed cooperation with Southeast Asian countries to build and jointly use petroleum storage tanks, secure critical minerals, and diversify energy sources. along with Japan's intention to provide $10 billion in financial support through the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. The safety of vessels stranded by Iran's blockade and potential participation in international efforts to ensure freedom of navigation through the strait are also expected to be on the agenda. Security cooperation more broadly is also expected to come up earlier in May during the first vice ministerial level 2+2 dialogue between the foreign and defense ministries of South Korea and Japan. The two sides discussed the possibility of establishing a mechanism for military logistics exchange and support. Whether an acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, which would allow the two nations' armed forces to exchange logistical support during exercises or crises, advances during these talks remains to be seen. South Korea's Ministry of National Defense has stated it currently has no intention of signing such an agreement with Tokyo, with concerns centering on what a deeper Japanese self-defense forces presence on the Korean peninsula during emergencies might look like. The Lee Takaichi summit comes at a sensitive time, immediately following the high-stakes summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, as well as the ongoing war in Iran. Analysts say the leaders of South Korea and Japan are expected to discuss the implications of the U.S.-China summit, including tensions over Taiwan and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, issues that concern their individual and bilateral interests, as well as their shared alliance with the United States. Professor Park Won-gon of Ewha Women's University put it plainly. The issues on Taiwan and the Strait of Hormuz were raised as key items on the agenda at the U.S.-China summit, and they also can play a significant role in the Korea-Japan summit, he said. Many observers say the two leaders feel the need to tighten cooperation because they face more acute geopolitical difficulties than their predecessors, among them Trump's America First posture and the economic disruption caused by the Iran conflict. South Korea and Japan have both pledged hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. business investments, and Trump's tariff war and his transactional approach to security are testing long-standing trust in the alliance. Professor Shin Bum, Dash Cheol of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, said the two leaders are anticipated to gradually pursue practical cooperation in energy supply chains and other areas of mutual interest in the economy and security, though he cautioned that it remains uncertain whether the summit would produce concrete outcomes. None of this unfolds in a vacuum. Relations began improving in 2023 when Lee and Takaichi's predecessors took steps to move beyond history disputes and strengthen cooperation, citing common challenges like the U.S.-China strategic competition, supply chain vulnerabilities, and North Korea's advancing nuclear arsenal. When Lee and Takaichi each took office last year, observers worried about Takaichi's reputation as a right-wing security hawk and anticipation that Lee, a political liberal, would tilt toward North Korea and China and away from the U.S. and Japan. But they have maintained cooperation, even in some unprecedented ways. In August, 2 months before Takaichi's inauguration, Lee became the first South Korean leader to choose Japan as his first destination for a bilateral summit. And when the two met in Nara in January, the meeting ended not with a dry joint statement, but with the two leaders drumming together to BTS's Dynamite, an image that circled the globe and set an unmistakably different tone for what Japan-South Korea diplomacy could look like. Lee has said he and Takaichi share a view that national leaders must act differently than ordinary politicians, yet the ghosts of history have not gone away. Ties between Seoul and Tokyo are so delicate they could suffer unexpected setbacks if the two governments failed to formulate coping measures for explosive issues such as Japan's colonial-era mobilization of Koreans as forced laborers, wartime sexual slaves, according to experts who say wrangling over those issues has eased as the two governments try to avoid public discussions. Following their summit talks, Lee and Taki are scheduled to May. A joint press announcement followed by a banquet dinner and a cultural performance. The Japanese Prime Minister is set to return home Wednesday morning via the Daegu airport. For now, what is clear is that two leaders from neighboring countries whose relationship has oscillated for decades between estrangement and cautious rapprochement, have chosen again to show up for each other. In a region where trust is hard won and easily lost, that itself is news.